All right, okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good day to all of my students. All right, okay. As you can see on the last video, I have shared with you what means by declarative versus non-declarative, in which you can see that the developments of student progress based on the activity that leads from the assessment. So if we recap back on the previous lecture, all right, so you can see that how does the students use or how does the teachers or the lecturers use the assessment to lead the activity to ensure that the students not only gain from the learning process, but the assessment drive on how does the students display the ability to describe back their factual knowledge, and how does we put context in our assessment. So, and the most important part is how we let the students to interact with the activity through the assessment, as mentioned before, because of we are talking about assessment as learning, assessment of learning, and assessment for learning. And we do agree that the performance-based assessment is really engaging student with active learning, and how does uh, the active learning can be designed according to more appropriate assessment method by having experiential actions, meaning that the assessment has been designed to allow the students to interact the real world situations, and how the students can explain uh, based on the experiential actions. So that's very important, because of we know that teaching and learning, yes, can be happen, but how does the assessment, that, as I mentioned before, become the new dimensions on changing our teaching and learning approach. So having said that, when we see on the perspective of assessments, we actually try our best to make sure that when we conduct our class, when we conduct our session through physical or online, we can design in the sense of how does the assessment address on the learning outcome. So that's the reason why it's very important for us to understand the knowledge of learning taxonomy. All right, so how does the learning taxonomy become so important? Because of the assessment need to be designed by understanding on the actions, behavior uh, that the student should portray and display to ensure that we measure their ability. So on measuring the ability as a teachers or lecturers, we need to understand what means by learning taxonomy. And the first learning taxonomy is quite common, because we are talking about cognitive learning domain. So the cognitive learning domain is something that not so unfamiliar, because of we use this quite we use this in our daily life, even whether we notice or we not notice about it. All right, so as we can see that the cognitive learning domain is actually to measure on how does the ability of lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills has been measured through different activities and different um, what we call different stages according to the levels of complexity. So the way that I like to share with you here, I draw some kind of looks like the iceberg, all right, in which we can see that the remembering is the top number one on how does the students uh, try to memorize everything that they did, and what did I do prepare for this task. So that one is a very common question we ask ourselves. And the process of remembering required the students to understand the fundamental theory and the fundamental aspect in the context of teaching and learning. And remembering will force the students to fall under understanding, meaning that C cognitive 2 or C2, in which what was important about what I learned today. So the student want to understand why is so important. And when the students start to understand why it's so important, and it's easy for the students to relate what could I use what I have learned today, meaning that the application of knowledge only can be happen when the students start remembering, understanding, and it will allow the student to apply the knowledge. So these are the process happen when we talk about how does the students know the context of learning. So these are the very basic phase that allow the students um, to uh, uh, to know certain knowledge. All right, and if you go more higher, all right, if you go more higher, um, after applying, student has been tasted by cognitive level 4 analyzing, and what did I do differently, do I use any pattern what I did. So meaning that the student, when the student know on how to apply, analyzing, which is the student how does the students do a compare and contrast in certain routine, and this allow the process of analyzing. And I'll give you one example. All right, you may know how to choose the best for you. For example, I want to buy a car. All right, so you know a very basic concept and knowledge about how to buy a good car, but in comparatively, to ensure that when you buy your car that fits your incomes, maybe fits your purpose of the family, maybe fit on the purpose of your personal interest, you need to have some kind of analyzing process to allow you which is the best for you. All right, so maybe for the young maybe non-married person, they maybe assume that okay, I like to buy a sedan because of I need to find a car very sporty, really fits me, and yes, that's my preference. But if you a guy like me, a family man, I think that the sedan car maybe not suitable for me, and I start to analyze what is the best car for me, and this allowed me to analyze and differentiate and to find and compare and do the contrast whether which one is value for my money. So maybe I opt for to have maybe SUV or MPV. So these are the process of analyzing whether whether we are realizing or not realizing, but the activity of analyzing is always happen on making sure that we can make a decision making. And when we start to do the analyzing, then we start to evaluate our decision making. So whether our decision making is really worth it, is our decision making give a short and long impact to our context because of how well I did I do, and what I learned about my strength and with where I can improve. So meaning that you start to evaluating in the perspective of teaching and learning. All right, so analyzing is a process of to understand better about the students, but evaluating in which you have to find what is the weaknesses of the students. As I mentioned before, the assessment can be used as a diagnostic, as a descriptive, and even for to predict what happened to the students. And the most important part is how can we and the students create a solutions and what you should do based on the evaluation process and the analyzing process, and what concrete step I take to overcome a challenge is actually what is the best solution that you can provide to ensure that you can solve the problems. And in this particular context, in solving problem they have two dimension, whether you will come up with a right answers, right solutions, or you will come up with the best answers or the best solutions. And the dimension of cognitive learning domains is not limited into the complexity of the knowledge, but we can see on the perspective of the dimensions of knowledge. So we are quite familiar with the complexity of knowledge because of we are being exposed by all Bloom taxonomy and even revised Bloom taxonomy. But in the perspective of Marzano and Kendall, 2001, all right, the cognitive learning domain can be explained, can be described into four dimensions. All right, instead of looking at the complexity of the knowledge, we also can see the dimension of the knowledge. So what is the dimension of the knowledge? All right. The dimension of knowledge has been divided into four categories. So what is all about? All right. What it is? All right. The first one is factual. meaning that every student, when they embark into their learning journey and learning process, the student should know the basic elements that acquainted with the disciplines, meaning that the student need to be exposed the knowledge of terminology, the knowledge of specific details, meaning that this is a very basic fundamental in which student to let the student to understand first this. All right, and the second step is how does the conceptual has been putting in after student has been given the basic elements of the terminology and specific details. So meaning that then the student will touch on the conceptual on to making sure that there are relationships between component and system based on the factual what we has been discussed with our students, and start to understand better, especially on the knowledge of classification, the knowledge of the system, the knowledge of the principles and generalizations, and also the knowledge of theory, model, and structure. And this is also not limited into this context. Maybe different fields have a different knowledge form than something that related with the conceptual. I think that is fall under these stages. All right, and this is very important to ensure that the students able to understand the factual and the conceptual, because of at the end of the day, the step number three is procedural, in which the students have to do something with with the factual and the conceptual, and how does the students relate their knowledge with specific skills, and let the students to use their specific techniques and methods, and allow them uh, in doing something, in mechanize their behavior towards on that particular of procedural methods. And the procedural encourage the students to apply the knowledge, and at the end of the day, when the student have mastered all of these three sections or three dimensions, the most important part is the what we call as the ultimatums of the learning is where the student can use the knowledge of knowledge, in which we call as a meta cognitive process, meaning that the students can be regulatorily use their learning for their own purpose, for their own uh, specific reason, and their knowledge would allow them to do their cognitive tasks, and this is we call as a self knowledge. So there are four dimensions of knowledge that we can explain here, and rather than looking on the complexity, we need to know the forms of knowledge and easy for us to design our assessment and learning context. And yes, this is a diagram on how I merge the cognitive complexity and also the depth, the knowledge dimension, because of we want to understand that yes, we have been exposed with the complexity of the knowledge, but on how to design the assessment according to the knowledge, we can break into four dimension. Even you can choose either one, or you can apply all four. Just a matter on what is the best and what are the contexts of learning that you want to share with the students. And yes, I give you one example. We do agree that when designing, for example, when designing an exam question paper, we always think about what is the complexity process that we want to offer to our students, but somehow or other we have difficulty in forming our questions. So this model will give you some kind of clarity in terms of, yes, I know that the cognitive complexity process is C1 until C6, but I can design my question based on the four dimension of knowledge: factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive. So meaning that maybe I can design my question, 40 MCQ question based on the factual, maybe five short essay based on the conceptual, maybe there are one long essay on the procedural or metacognitive. So meaning that when you're designing your questions, you know that your question has been packaged by the complexity process, and also the knowledge dimension. So this is very important for us to understand the cognitive learning, not only limited into the complexity. So on how to design a good questions, on how to design a very good task to the students, need to be consider all of these knowledge dimension. I know that it's quite new for some of the students because of our focus before this is looking on the complexity, but this new knowledge will allow you to design much better questions, much better assignments that allow you to activate the experiential action based assessment. So, and we need to agree that there is some point we need to ensure on how to design the best quality of questions. This is also has been catered when we start our project number one. All right. So, and the reason why I shared the knowledge dimension because of we want the student to respond and reflect to us. So I do believe that to engage students on reflecting the learning process is not that easy. So meaning that you need to understand the complexity of cognitive, the dimension of the knowledge, and how does do we as a lecturers allow them with a very specific questions that really let them to respond according to that questions. And I think that not even physical face to face or online learning, we facing this. I think that quite an ages because of when we ask the question and let one of the students to give some kind of feedbacks. I think that there are some challenge there. Maybe some of the students refuse to share their idea, but maybe some of the students are really like to involve and engage with the questions. So on how to motivate students to be more reflective by knowing that yes, I have the complexity of the knowledge. I know that yes, I have the know I already know the knowledge dimensions. We need to understand on how does our student respond. All right. So the reflective learning strategy is really significant with the cognitive learning domain. So there are four stages when we talk about reflection and a reflective learning strategy in the perspective of cognitive learning. All right. So number one, you can see on the perspective of responding. How does you ask the question that allow the students to express their opinion and asking back? All right. So when we say the responding, it's not only responding between you as the teachers or lecturers with the students, but how does the student responding each other, and how does the three-dimensional meaning that the teachers, the students, and their peers is actually responding each other to create more engaging classroom. So I think that when we come up with a very good questions according to the taxonomy domain and also the dimension of knowledge, I think that there are some questions. The question need to be well designed because of we want the student to respond based on the questions, and the most important part to create an environment, to create an atmosphere that allow the student to respond first, because of we need to encourage this because of some of the students feel that they are demotivated when they are start to responding, but the lecturers or teachers start to reject their answers because of the answer is not right. So these are the most biggest mistake that happened to the teachers. All right. So what we need to do here is to encourage and to allow them to participate. Don't bother about the wrong answer and the right answer. Just let them to speak. All right. And when the students start to speak and the students start to engage, what we as the teachers and facilitators start to relate the context, how you are making connection with your with their prior knowledge, and you as the teachers want to give them with a new knowledge, and how do you combine this the prior knowledge and the new knowledge to do some kind of readjustment. All right, so the realignment. So meaning that when I start to say there's no right or wrong answer, meaning that you as the teachers start to relate their prior knowledge and their new knowledge and do some kind of adjustment and also realignment. So these are our primary role as the teachers. As I mentioned before, if you want to promote student-centered learning, you need to open up the space to let the students to engage with you. Don't create a border, don't create the gap because of the student want to learn and you also want to teach them. And yes, when the students start to relate with their prior knowledge and the new knowledge, and then you should start to talk about the importance of knowledge, meaning that the reason why they have to understand the knowledge. All right. I know I cannot say that is a bigger mistake, but I would rather say this is our common mistake. All right. When we come to the class, we teach them, but hardly for us to explain why they have to learn about it. All right. Why? So the creation is what is very important for every single students because they want to find the significant to them. So the reason of learning, you can use whether you want to use the qualitative or the quantitative reasoning, but the reasoning will allow the student to understand better the concepts of knowledge they have learned before, and then they will making sense of that knowledge and they start to reconstruct by their own self and they start to reframe the past and the new knowledge to make it our teaching learning more sensible. So making sense in teaching and learning is really important because of the students. One, you need to put the belief to the students, and the student need to believe the content that you deliver to them. And responding, relating, reasoning, and reconstructing cannot be nurtured in one day. You need to nurture this by process. You need to have it this by design, not by chance. You need to understand the process, and you need to allow this process happen in your class. Yes, maybe sounds difficult for the primary schools or the secondary schools, but I think that these are the things that we need to look at because of what? Because of we already know that UPSR PT3 has been abolished. So I think that this must be a reason why, because of they want the students. We want to focus on how to develop the student potential, not only looking on their grade. So to ensure that every each of the teachers understand their roles, they have to relearn, unlearn the way on their teach their students. Um, and I think that the the way we look on the perspective of teaching and learning nowadays is different because of we can see that how good the students in their grades is not somehow or other. You have to agree with me that it might be not reflecting their as a holistic students, meaning that the students who have intellectual, who have emotional, spiritual, and physical balance, as I mentioned in our national education philosophy. All right. So that is something that related with the cognitive learning domain. So how about effective learning domain? So effective learning domain meaning that something to do with emotions, behavior, feeling, and how does the students use this to increase their soft skill. And this soft skill is very important because of the student need to practice the soft skills. And by looking on the effective learning domain, there are 5 stages of effective learning domain. We start with receiving, responding, valuing, organizing, and internalizing. So there are 5 steps need to be nurtured, and we need to design our learning according to this phase. I know that some of the phase maybe can jump up, but I need to you to understand that the process of nurturing effective learning domain will start with how does we as the teachers and lecturers attending our student with this stimuli. So meaning that let them, how does the student listen and how does the student respect your delivery and in the perspective or in the context of your subject area. So and then we need to see that how does the students respond to attend that stimuli, because we are given to them the stimuli, and how does the student attend the stimuli, and how does the students use the stimuli to question the new idea, the concept models, and in order to fully understand them. And then when they start to attend the stimuli, start to receive and responding, and they knew the values of that knowledge, then they will start to organize and start to internalize meaning that they start to integrate the value in, and the value is actually is a control system of their behavior. So I give you one example. So what are the examples? For example, I have a kids. My daughter names okay. All right. So and I think that this example is really relatable because of we try to make sure that the student having some changes on their behavior. But you need to nurture by the process. This is so that's the reason why I give you the examples. All right. So I have my daughter's name. Okay. Okay. So when I drove my car and try to take her back, all right, from the school. So I saw that her throw a cans of water. All right. So and I think that when she threw the cans of water at the wrong place, I I start to realize that okay, this is a very bad behavior because of you cannot easily throw your litter at anywhere because of you need to throw your litter in the specific locations, meaning that in the garbage. So when I saw that, so what I need to do here, what I need to do here is when she entered the car and I said to okay, what are you doing? Why you why you throwing your why you throw your can of water in the something that is not the right place? So why don't you put in the garbage? She said that I just throw it and I don't want to think about it. So I think that something that not good, but I start to attend her with this stimuli, meaning that I want her to listen and want to her realize that she did wrong. So I say to okay that okay you cannot litter your cans easily like that. You need to put in the garbage, in the designated garbage, and this is will secure your school environment. So you need to show that you have a good behavior because you also are the prefect at schools. So then she start to responding, but I cannot find any garbage near to me. So I said to her that why don't you just keep your your things in the plastics or in anywhere. Then when you enter the car, then you can throw all the trash in the car. So what I need to do here is to give some kind of receiving and responding to make some kind of mutual contract with Orchid and me to make sure that don't litter easily your trash at anywhere in the school. All right. So then this is how I try to educate my kids. So I put some values to her because of I want her to demonstrate a very good ethics and behavior on dealing with throwing a litter, uh, not easily throwing the litter at school. So what I need to do here is when I start to putting what we start to when she start to receiving and responding and me put a value on that particular of manners. So what I need to do here is to put I need to initiate something. Maybe I have to prepare maybe a small plastic in the car, and when she enter the car and she can just dump everything in the plastic, and I start to organize her behavior and allow her to understand that. So don't easily litter your trash or your things. So when did she start to analyze that and start to realize the importance of that, and easily it become a system on their behavior, meaning that when she know that she have something that she want to throw, she know that if there is no designated garbage, then I have to keep it first. Then when I enter the car, then I can trash and then I can uh, put everything in the small plastic that my father provide for me. So these are the things that we need to nurture in the classroom. So and even in our daily life. So the process of receiving, responding, valuing, organizing, and internalizing is not only happen in our formal learning, it also happen in our informal learning especially. So by knowing this process of nurturing of their behavior through effective domain, so the students know that the nurturing habits or nurturing behavior is not that easy. You need to understand the process, and this process will allow the student learn better. And the most important part is to internalize, to integrate the value in their behavior. So this is something that we talk about effective learning domain, in which uh, on how to form our students and uh, strengthen up their effective sides of as a human behavior, as a human. All right, and we also have the psychomotor learning domain. All right, that involve the sensory motor, and there are all have a seven. You maybe when you search, you may can see that there are two. The psychomotor can be measured by two models. The model number one, they have about five steps of psychomotor, but the slideshow that I showed that I shared with you is something that the psychomotor can be measured through seven steps. So then what we want to do here is how does the students use their psychomotor, all right, whether and how does the students making their more skillful and enhance their activity through their sensory. So there are seven levels here: perceptions, awareness, sensory stimulus, set, relates, guided response, mechanism, complex overt response, adaptation, and origination. So what I want to sum up here is I give you one example how play football, for example, play football. So before we can play the football, we need to really aware on our sensory stimulus. So meaning that whether you can kick the balls or not, you can justify that. You can identify yourself. Whether you are good footballer or you are not good footballer, you need to ensure that you have a very good sensory stimulus. How does your legs can respond when you get the balls, and how does you kick back how does you use all the sensories to respond on that particular balls. And then what you need to do here is, if you want to play the football, you need to set the cues and know how to play the footballs, and try to understand the guide response and how to perform and demonstrate on playing the footballs, meaning that you have to understand on how to play the footballs. You need to understand on how to kick the footballs, how to take the penalty, how to dribbles and whatnot. And the mechanism is only happen when you put some challenge there, meaning that you are not playing alone, but you maybe play with your partners. And also it become more challenges when you start to involve with matches. And the more matches that you join in, the more complete embarrassment will happen. And then the adaptation will be then the adaptation will be nurtured based on the experience of playing footballs. And after all, you can see that you maybe can, if you are good footballer, maybe you can have your own origination instead on looking on how do you use your skills. So I give you one example. For example, Ronaldo, Messi, Hugo, they have a very fantastic on how they are using their Psychomoto movement. All right, so even though there's some movement is unpredictable, and when the movement is unpredictable and the way they are playing football is different, meaning that they are reaching into the high order psychomotor activity. And when we talk about the psychomotor activity, there are some soft lists that I shared here, the disciplines and the tools, and meaning that you are using your sensory to ensure that you can do lots of activity, all right, according to your specific fields. And I think that on the perspective of PSV, we are using psychomotor skills is quite in numbers, because of the student need to understand on how to use the brush, on how to use certain materials, on how to use the pens and pencils. And also, I think that more psychomotor activity can be happen through visual art subject. All right. So the reason why I shared with you the importance of uh, cognitive, psychomotor, and effective learning domains is to making sure that we want the student to access the knowledge. On how to access the knowledge is to understand the importance of learning taxonomy. Because of what? Because of you will design the learning taxonomy, you will design the activity based on the learning taxonomy, and the most important part, you will measure them through the learning taxonomy. Because of what? When you start to understand the best taxonomy, and then you start to realize on how to design your teaching and learning and let them to engage with you. So accessibility and engagement by knows and know-hows is very important, and you can tap it into C1, C2, and C3. On the perspective of effective learning domain, you can see on how the student respond and value the knowledge, and on the perspective of psychomoto, on how the student understand the sensory motor and mechanize their behavior. But if you want the student to get more experience and explore the knowledge, you need to do more engaging activity. As I mentioned previous before, how can we design performance based assessment, how can we design experiential learning assessment? Only having This only can be happen through experience and explorations, as I illustrate in the slides. So to have that, you need to show how and does, and you need to let them to internalize, and you need them to adapt and also to making sense of their learnings. So in making connections of teaching and in making connections, we as the teachers and lecturers need to understand these four perspectives. All right, the learning only can be happen by realizing this. So that's the reason why understanding to understand the cognitive, the psychomotor, and effective domain is very important. All right. So, what are the summary of today? All right. According to the last previous lecture and also for today lectures, number one, you need to understand what is the domain and what is the skill set that required by the students. All right. Number two, you need to understand the cognitive, psychomotor, and effective demands, and you need to understand the validity, reliability, fairness, and consistent properties, workflow, and also technology integrations. All right. So, and I think that that's for today. I will. I think that I will give you some kind of assignment related to the lean taxonomy to let you to understand better about it. So I think that that's all from me. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum. Have a very good day.